Next speaker for the day is architect Sandeep, and his studio is sixth semester studio. Thanks.
Yeah, it's a pleasure for me to be here amongst peers and sharing views. And this exercise has opened up my own perceptions about what should be taught or what one should look at. And this semester that I have been given has already been spoken of by Bijoy and Bhushan, and it is basically the sixth semester. And it clearly describes, like where they stated, it describes it's about an institution. It has a specific kind of task. You look at it in terms of various criteria, in terms of goals, architecture goals, and how do you look at formal, informal, interactive, understand the role of built environments in therapeutic and nurturing institutions. It is kind of very prescriptive in some way. And yeah, they have also gone on to kind of talk about case studies, which was clearly mentioned again, about building beyond 1980s. And the way they need to attempt the campus in terms of two kind of scenarios, in terms of building on the edge or within the fabric of the city. And this goes on to describe the types of buildings that probably fall into this purview. So it is a little deceptive in some way. That is my personal take on it, because when you start getting into type, there is a problem that we all face. It becomes kind of it simplifies the intent. It starts looking like things starts getting complacent in the studio. Once you start talking about an institution, a student who's studying in an institution has a certain familiarity with it. There is a certain view, there's a certain imagery associated with it. So it sort of starts becoming a kind of possibility that it can risk falling into a certain kind of oversimplified language or an empty rhetoric. So that it really misses the point of what a sixth semester student needs to know. It kind of, if it's not been directed well by a kind of a professor or a tutor who's involved, so it calls for, like what the previous speakers have already spoken about, in terms of somebody capable of directing, somebody capable of inspiring. But I also wanted to look at this syllabus from a slightly another point of view. I made it a point to see if I can look at it irrespective of the the personality of the tutor, which usually plays a huge role. I agree. Can there be a method that can be encouraged? Instead of making it about a type, can we look at the idea of a method or a skill that one needs to acquire at that point in time, which probably becomes a lens, lens to study other subjects as well. Usually you have history and theory of architecture, which have been kind of taught as in elaborate lectures, and it's never analytical. You never learn to analyze. So where is it that you learn to analyze? You start looking at design studios for the clues. You start looking at how does one look at a studio in terms of how do I understand a building, so that I can probably apply it in terms of what I'm studying in theory at that point in time, which happens to be modern architecture. It has to do with works of Doshi, Korea, Rem Koolhaas, and even history as well, like I think already which has been described. So, and what I'm trying to touch on here is there was this issue of horizontal and vertical integration. In terms of horizontal integration and vertical integration, there is it's tightly set. There's no borrowing between each of these studios. So I was trying to see if there is a method, like here, that can be acquired, and you base the studio on the idea of structuring. I would like to use the word structuring here, like from all respects. I want to look at structuring. How does one structure a study, a case study or a research? How does one structure a program? How does he understand a program? Then how does one understand spatial structuring or formal structuring? So this becomes a line of thought, it gives you a structure to understand. Now this can be carried on into other streams as well, once you start figuring out what these terms mean actually in terms of how does one do a research in terms of case study. I mean, it's very important, like already people have spoken of, in terms of tutors accompanying as people being or playing active roles in the study. You have to be there. You have to choose a building that is existing. You need to study the building and from all parameters, various parameters, and especially I'm looking at the idea of decoding things in terms of spatial structuring. How does one really understand this whole thing about the hierarchy of spaces? How does one look at programmatic differences? How does one understand movement structuring? How does one move through the thing? So it becomes a kind of a skill that one acquires to study other buildings, other things, and they look at their own work back, which is probably the necessity of any studio. It is important that they are able to look back at their own work, probably analyze the entire thing. And the other thing about this whole studio should be about emphasis on graphical legibility. There is a lack of clear understanding of how to represent, especially case studies, because it's vaguely done. You have like I think it's already been touched upon again, in terms of picking up of the internet. It should be mandatory that they should be drawing these projects, and there are typologies or reference material available in terms of books, which are like, there's a nice book which is called Precedents in Architecture, where it talks about a certain way of looking at a building. So this starts aligning the students to a way of looking at things. How does one draw? How does one represent? How does one make diagrams? Which is crucial. It's a skill that you would carry forward, and you would use it to analyze the next set of years, which is basically to do with urban design, as well as you're doing your thesis in the 8th semester, which is a very tight kind of a situation. So one needs to learn to analyze. I think design studio should be about that. How do you analyze? How do you foster that thinking? And there is the formal structuring aspect is to how you kind of connect through tectonics. How do you make a building touch the ground? How does it touch the sky? How does material inform a way of detailing, or inform how does the structure is designed? And this clearly, allows the person to look at BC or structures in a very, very new light. So it starts integrating in a very different way. It is like a reversal of this thing. Instead of saying, okay, in this semester they are studying this trusses, the steel trusses, and you kind of try and force them to use steel or this thing. Rather, it's about probably knowing a methodology of looking at it, saying, okay, if it's a steel structure, the way it sits with reference to the sky, or how the structure becomes lighter, how it touches the ground, those are the things that one needs to inculcate, or how materials start dictating how the forms get built. So this was the kind of thinking that I was looking at, and I really don't have a structuring for how the studio needs to be carried out. But there's one important thing, that it has to be, there needs to be a formatting, which is basically about how you learn collectively. And collectively, when I say it has to be about pin-ups, pin-ups, and everybody needs to be present, which currently doesn't happen in many of the, at least in a couple of schools that I've seen. They're continuously working, which is a problem. You need to be there when there is a discussion, and you need to be a part of the discussion. And the pin-ups allows a person to commit. You're asking him to commit, so you can really structure the entire program. And there is, of course, the discretes, which needs to be valued, which is the studio sessions basically. And The final thing that I want to kind of bring to focus is that apart from making these drawings and making these case studies and presenting them in a certain structured way, I think it's also about making a report at the end of this entire thing, which kind of substantiates, which tells you how to think, how to rationalize a project, or his own personal understanding of how to do it in terms of diagrams. So it starts encouraging a person to think, and that is what we need to initiate. But at 6th semester, you require certain kind of maturity, which is what would prepare him for what follows. So yeah, and I think that is more or less what I wanted to say, and I'd like to just end with end the presentation with this. Thank you.